Redditors, what is the most expensive mistake you have ever made? So there was a leak from my bathroom upstairs to the kitchen right underneath it. Every time someone would shower, water would slowly begin to drip into the kitchen. I thought there was a leak somewhere in the drain pipe, and I took the kitchen ceiling down looking for it. And this was an old home, so there was this cement type of plaster with metal lattice work through it on top of wood slates. It took forever to expose the drain pipe, only to find out that the little knob thing on the shower faucet that you pull up to turn on the shower had broken, and I just needed to replace that. That piece cost me $7. Then I had to completely replace my kitchen ceiling. Next story, getting a DUI. On top of it being incredibly stupid, reckless, and dangerous, it ended up costing me $20,000, all said and done. If there's a silver lining, it's that, first and foremost, nobody was hurt. I was simply pulled over by an observant officer. And second, it woke me up to the fact that I'm the kind of person who just shouldn't drink alcohol. Things are much better now. Next story. I once trusted a person who said they needed cash to go to Boston to see a sick relative of theirs. I gave him $80 for a bus there and back. He shows up driving with a friend of his. I then realized he was scamming me. Confirmed the next day when his girlfriend called and said he was arrested and she needed money to go see him. She said that he said I was his only friend, blah, blah, blah. And she asked for $100 to be money ordered to her. Blocked their numbers, and I only lost $80, but I learned a huge lesson in trust. Next story. I had no idea it was even an option to take classes at community college for the first year or two and then transfer into a 4-year university. Had good grades and standardized test scores, so I was under the impression that my only real choice was which university I wanted to attend the next year. Meanwhile, my girlfriend went to community college for 2 years, transferred to the same university, and got a degree that looks exactly like mine for somewhere in the ballpark of $10 to $20K cheaper. Edit. It's worth noting that she knew what university she wanted to go to and what she wanted to major in, and made sure that all of the CC classes she took would transfer and were necessary for her major. In general, if you go to any kind of college with no plan and kind of wing it, you're going to pay a lot more. And see, folks, that's why yours truly dropped out of college, because he hated it. This upbeat demeanor was taking a pummeling like Riley Reid. Now I pursue voice acting and screenwriting professionally, and I'm suffering, but at least I'm suffering towards something I like. Anyway, next story. So when I built my first gaming PC back in 2005, I spent $800 plus on the CPU alone. It was probably something meant for workstations and serious multitasking, and I stupidly thought more expensive equals better. But I could have had the same performance for gaming with something in the $200 to $300 range most likely. About a year later, I also spent around $500 on a second video card to get SLI, which was a big scam novelty at the time. The performance increase was super negligible and a giant waste of money. I will say this though, seeing some of the other responses in here makes me feel slightly better about my mistake. Next story. I bought a house built in 1935 because it was super cute and reminded me of my grandmother's house. I find out soon after that it's a kit house from the 1935 Montgomery Ward catalog, which would have only cemented my desire for it. I still like it, but so far, $3,000 for a skylight removal, $350 to reroute the kitchen sink drain after the existing pipes split under the concrete, $1,300 winter average for heating oil so far, which led to $2,700 in electrical work to bring the wiring up to code so that I could get $1,200 in blown-in insulation. But I'm building equity, right? Next story. I earned a few academic scholarships out of high school, but didn't know how to use them. I figured they would have been automatically applied, but I didn't start for college right away, so my lack of understanding, preparation, and willingness to ask people the no resulted in me losing a couple $1,000s towards my education. Next story. Not my mistake, but an employee of mine was mixing pigment with powder to create a certain color. I used to work in roto-molding and accidentally used the powder, costing us $2,600. But it doesn't end there, unfortunately, because my brother, the floor manager, decided to give him another shot since it was the first week on the job and still put him on the machines with them. A little backstory on the molds on the machines: they are welded, then coated with Teflon, expensive AF, so we can only use plastic scrapers on them to scrape the other excess plastic. Well, this guy ignored my brother's warning and used a metal scraper, quite nearly stripping off all of the Teflon. Can't mold something that has scratches all over it or comes out effed up. Needless to say, he cost us $5,000+ in damages in one day and fired on the spot this time. Side note, this employee was fully trained and warned about these potential mishaps before each shift and during. Next story. Rented a U-Haul to move from apartment to condo, same town, and bumped one of the balconies in the alley behind the condos. Put a very small dent in the canopy part of the truck, and when we returned to the truck, they told us since we didn't get the insurance, we would have to pay for the fix within 48 hours. They said that it would cost $4,800 to fix, and they refused to let me take it to a third-party mechanic for a quote. Then, they said if we didn't pay within 48 hours, it would go to court where it would be doubled. I wasn't too well off then, financially, and maybe too naive, but we decided to pay to avoid having it doubled. My wife was in tears at the counter as she gave them her credit card. F U-Haul. They'll never ever get another penny from me for the rest of my life. Next story. This is one of those not me, but comments, but it perfectly fits here. My fiancé and I lived with his uncle when we were first starting out, and this dude was paranoid like no other. Few friends, cash only, no banks, that whole mindset. He had a business partner who mailed him $10,000 cash one time to avoid having to pay it wired or having to explain anything to the IRS. They'd done it before by vacuum sealing it to make sure it was as flat as possible and hiding it in clothes or whatever in a box. This time, though, his partner got lazy and just vacuum sealed it, then slid the thing into a big cardboard envelope thing. Well, some slick postal employee must have known what to look for because what got delivered was a cardboard envelope slid open up the side with a few blank papers stuffed inside. So, 10,000 untraceable dollars gone forever. I still wonder what the postal employee did with that. Hopefully took their partner out for a nice dinner and gave their kids a good Christmas. Next story. My first job out of college, I worked as a developer at a small retail company's IT department. My team only consisted of myself, a lead developer, and my boss, who also chipped in with the coding. Given our small size and flexibility requirements, I guess my manager didn't feel the need to burden us with strict protocols of safety procedures for testing and production deployment, as he trusted we were wise and responsible enough to do the right thing. Well, one day I had a small bug to fix on the website checkout page. I thought I could save some time cutting corners. It was an obvious fix and only a single-line JavaScript update. So, rather than go through the typical flow of testing locally, committing to changes to the repository, then deploying to the production server and finally testing again on the live website, I figured I could get away with updating the live production code first thing, just to get the fix out there, because thoroughly testing would be a waste of time. Well, it turns out that even a single-line update is not immune to the possibility of introducing a typo. That typo ended up breaking the JavaScript on the page, thus rendering the checkout button non-functional. It wasn't until almost noon the next day that one of the sales representatives noticed we hadn't received an online order for almost 24 hours. If only one of the customers had called the problem in sooner. By the time I discovered the checkout button wasn't working and corrected the error, the estimated loss of sales was placed at approximately $40,000. In the end, I got a write-up/warning, and my boss finally decided to implement a formal deployment procedure that involved management approval before any production server updates. I value it as a crucial lesson learned. There's no change too small to warrant testing because even the simplest thing I do is vulnerable to bumble effery. Next story. I'm not sure why I did this, but I suppose it's because I was pretty lonely at the time. I started talking to a guy online who was in a nearby city, Melbourne, 400 kilometers away. The closest city around my area, mind you. We get along well though, but then he told me he's from North Queensland, which is like 2,000 kilometers away from where I live. He was down in Melbourne with his family and was driving back up to his hometown in a week or two. We spoke the whole time he traveled up north. I think it took around 3 days before he got to Brisbane, which is a few hundred kilometers south of his town. By this point, I was falling pretty hard for him. And if out of the blue, he asked me if I wanted to fly up to Brisbane and stay in the hotel he was staying at once his family had left. I gave it a lot of thought, stalked every little detail of his Facebook and Instagram account to make sure he was legit, and eventually agreed to fly up and stay with him for a week. It cost around $350 for the flights, which was surprisingly cheap for the distance, but here's the thing. I was on student welfare at the time, so only had $100-ish left and didn't get paid for another 2 weeks. I thought, alright, I can do with $100. I'm sure he'll buy me dinner since I've made the effort to come see him. I should also mention that I lied to him early on and said I have a job on a fishing boat with my brother, which I have worked on a few times, but it's nothing stable, so not really a job. Well, I ended up missing my plane due to waiting for my phone to charge in a shopping center so I could transfer some money over to get a Skybus to the airport, $20. There was a traffic jam on the freeway in Melbourne, so I had to pay an extra $50 to get the next flight in the morning. Great. When I finally got to Brisbane, I legit had around $50 left after having to catch a $20 train from the airport to the city. And the first night I was there, he asked me to pay for dinner. I said no since I came up here. I didn't want to lose my pride about being poor and ended up calling my dad to borrow some money. He put $50 in my account, which I was so grateful for at this point in time. I was seriously beginning to stress out. And well, I ended up running out of money on the third day. And I made up a lie about how I was waiting for my employer to transfer my paycheck into my account. I don't think he was very happy having to pay for my meals, but he did say something along the lines of, if I didn't care about you, I wouldn't be paying for you after I made a fuss over it. But anyway, on the last day, I had to get up early to go to the airport, which was a 3-hour walk away. And there was no way I was going to ask for money for an Uber to make it in time by walking. Somehow, I managed to use PayPal to go into the negatives and order an Uber to the train station and a train ticket to the airport. When I arrived in Melbourne, I couldn't afford a Skybus, so I walked to the closest suburb near the airport and caught a city bus and then train to the train station using my Miki card, which somehow still had money on it from a few years back. TLDR, don't travel across the country to meet up with a guy you've never met, especially when you have no money and live off of welfare. OOP, you poor thing. I have a similar story. Not as bad, but one time I matched with a girl on Tinder, and y'all, I was so lonely at this time. This was like my lonely era, okay? Just all the time. And we got to talking, we were conversing decently, and she was like, I'll come over. And I was like, okay. And she's like, well, I need $20 for gas. I was like, okay. She never came over. Lesson learned. So now every time I date a woman, she has to pay for everything. And if she doesn't tip more than 50%, well, then we're done. I don't want to talk to her anymore. Next story. I bought a Saab 9-3. I paid $2,000 for it from my lab partner. It was a high mileage car, but my God, it was fun to drive. For the first 5 or 6 weeks I owned it. Then it blew a coil pack. At the time, I didn't know that's what had happened, but the mechanic figured out what I should have known to check. They wanted to charge me $800 for the part. I found one on eBay, had it shipped overnight for a total of $196, then installed it for $200. Found out later the install process involved a grand total of unscrewing 4 bolts, snapping the part into place, and screwing them back in. Doctor of Motors and Chico can eat crap. Slimeball business with predatory service advisors. Then it blew another coil pack. Then it blew a crankshaft sensor. Then another coil pack. Then another. Add in other miscellaneous engine components along the way, plus brakes and a few ruptured brake lines. I don't remember what it was at this point, but I remember spending all day removing a manifold to change some tiny, cheap little part that was essential to operations. Except for the first instance, I did all of the work myself. No way I could afford the prices of a European car repair shop. Each time I bought a coil pack, they were more expensive. Last one was about $300. All in all, 2 years in, I dumped about $2,500 to $3,000 into a $2,000 car. Lesson learned. Though, I wouldn't say all the money was a complete waste. Some of that $2.5 to $3K were the tools I still own now, and have come in handy since then. Next story. Dad passed away. I was given his house 2+ hours away while wife and I had a newborn and were working full-time. Let lifelong friend of mine move in for monthly rent, and he actually helped fix up the house and keep it in good condition. His girlfriend started staying the night once in a while at the house, then more often. Well, him and the girlfriend had a falling out. He left and stopped paying rent as we discussed. I sent family over to check on the house, and someone's living there? I check on the house that weekend. It's my friend's now ex-girlfriend living there. She asks for 1 week to move all of her stuff out that I didn't even know was there. I had my new family in the car with me and was not prepared for having to remove someone and all of their stuff, so I said okay. I was to come back the following weekend when my schedule allowed and she would be gone. Well, this final week let her have a full 30 days living at my house, and she had proof. So she was now a resident and needed a full legal eviction to get her out of my house. When you're involved in an eviction, there's all sorts of help and organizations and websites for the people living at the house to get answers. For the landlord evicting the tenant, I had almost nil that I found. Had to pay a crap ton of money and had to drive to the county courthouse 2+ hours away like 6 to 8 times over the next 2 months to get her out of my dad's house. During this time, I was not allowed to enter the house. I set up cameras on the neighbor's property with their permission, attempting to record damage to the house, parties, theft of my property still at the residence. Didn't get jack squat. And she did about $40K damage to the home, stole a lot of my dad's belongings that were hidden in the attic, and cost me an insane amount of time. And well, really, I did this to myself by letting my friend move in. Took almost 2 full years of going across the state every weekend to work on the house. I guess I can pay more money to go after her for the damages to the house, but she was living off of illegal means and state aid during this whole process and would never be able to pay me back. And one final kicker? The house was heated via fuel oil in Michigan, and we have cold winters. This B-word ran out of fuel in late December, and she didn't have $150 needed to get a fuel oil delivery. You have to order a minimum amount to get them to drive out to your house and put fuel oil in your tank. She used electric heaters and had several of them running all winter to compensate. Because she was on state aid or some crap, the company couldn't shut off her power in the middle of winter, so she racked up an average of $1,700 a month in electric bills over the winter. When I went to put the power back on in my name, I was told that I have to pay her $6,300 balance before the power could be restored. This was because I didn't set up some landlord program with the power company in the first place. This took another 3 months or so, and a couple of hundred to a lawyer to get straightened out. And well, I feel better. I think I made this long as hell so no one actually reads it. It's like I'm pissed at her and myself all over again. Anyways, the house is fixed up and sold now, for less than half the profit we originally anticipated. But Jesus, I lost so much money. Next story. Dated a guy who seemed great. Moved in together. He then decided his job was boring, so he quit. I spent years paying almost all of the rent, paying his car insurance, buying the groceries, paying the majority of the bills, etc., while he did whatever he wanted. I don't even want to know how much I wasted on him. I'm just glad to be rid of him. And because everyone asks, I paid his car insurance and bills so he wouldn't have an excuse not to look for work. I paid for groceries because I still had to eat. He was responsible for anything he wanted that I didn't eat. And I paid the rent because my landlady was so sweet and kind, and I didn't want her or her family to suffer because my crappy ex didn't feel like paying his half for that month. Next story. Marrying my ex-husband. He controlled all of our finances. My paycheck went into one pot, so of course that meant he could spin how we were doing any which way he wanted. On top of that, all of the stupid cars he kept buying, losing the house, not getting my full half because he kept it, all the expensive electronics, giving his family money every month, not investing in my own 401k and not getting half of his, losing out on the supposed mutual fund that existed. Still not sure it did, but I don't know where that money went. And of course, the divorce expenses and cost of therapy afterwards. Not to mention the money I gave him to help him during the divorce because I still cared about him. Next story. It was my second try to get my driving license back in Spain. Everything went well, apparently. I was asked to park the car, so I parked it in a huge space. It was in front of a garage door, so I thought I'll move it backwards a bit. Little by little, I suddenly heard a huge thud. I hit the back car. Funniest thing though, the garage door was unused and I could have left the car there and that was the end of the test, but of course, I failed. Now, I don't know about other countries, but in Spain, at least in my region, there's no tests in August, and this was right before that. So I had to keep going to driving lessons for a month, failed a third time until I passed it the fourth try. And in total, I spent like €1,000 more than what I should have. I'll always remember this. Next story. I misread a blueprint and ordered $90,000 worth of material the wrong size once. We were able to use it later, but I was crapping my pants for a little while. Took a buyer at a large corporation at her word, and she claimed she needed a bunch of parts ASAP and she would get us a PO as soon as possible. We ordered a $150,000 mill run of stainless steel. That material is still sitting in our parking lot almost 2 years later. We don't take buyers at their word anymore. Next story. Swore I wanted to go to film school straight out of high school. Applied to Full Sail in Orlando, Florida. They require half of the tuition up front, $22,000. I went for a tour of the school and was dazzled by the cool neon lights and film sets. I took out a loan with Sally Mae and began school. After the second semester, I realized it wasn't for me. While it was a bachelor's degree, it's not like you can change your major and readjust to your newly realized interests. So I ended up miserable and dropping out in the first days of the second semester. I still owed $22,000 regardless if I dropped out or not. So I decided to drop now and save myself from spending another $22,000 in the second year. And to rub salt in the wound, absolutely none of the credits earned at Full Sail were eligible to transfer to other universities. $22,000 and nothing to show for it. That was 10 years ago, though, and I finished paying off the loan, thank God. I joined the military and worked hard to pay off that loan. I took advantage of education benefits and worked on an actual bachelor's degree, graduated, and then completed a master's program from a great university in Florida near where I was stationed. I've got a great job now doing something I love. I've redeemed myself, but it was certainly a learning experience. Next story. In the 4th grade, another student wanted to buy my Game Boy Advance off of me for $100. I had an extra one since my sister had one but never used it and gave it to me. Thinking, sweet, I can make an easy 100, I took his offer. The next day, I bring the Game Boy and he says, hey, let me test it out first. I want to make sure it works. I'll play it in class. We had different classes. Then, naive me gave him the Game Boy without taking any collateral. And that effer never paid me and stole my Game Boy. Next story. I signed up for a credit card just before college. A few weeks in, I get a call from an Indian lady on behalf of the credit card company claiming she's just following up and has a few questions. She's speaking a mile a minute only to pause and go, is this right? Is this okay? I assumed she was just verifying my information, so I just kept saying sure, as I was in the middle of studying and just wanted to get back to it. Well, I stopped using the card after about a year when I got a call from a collections agency. Apparently, I had agreed to sign up for identity insurance without realizing it at a cost of $95 a year with 2 years plus interest build up that I never paid for. I was at my grandmother's funeral when I got the call and told her to F off when she said I should be handling the situation better and just pay her. By the time I got around to being able to afford to pay it off, my credit was in the gutter. Next story. All right, I used to work in IT for a large restaurant. My job was to roll out updates to the payment devices. It was during a stressful time when another company bought us out. Not to mention it was March Madness, so we had to be careful with what we did. I was told to approve some updates for about 150 plus stores. When we approve these updates, we make sure to push them for after hours as to keep business flowing. It was 10 minutes before I was about to leave for the day. I pushed the updates to roll right away. It was 1:50 p.m., right in the middle of lunchtime, then went home and didn't think much of it. So I came into work the next day and my bosses were crapping themselves. We had store deployments removed and so everything grinded to a halt. My job very much relied on these deployments. My bosses explained that the level 1 call center was experiencing an influx of calls at around 2 p.m., 200 plus, from restaurant managers about why their payment devices were going offline. The head IT guy of the company, I think they're called CIOs, called my boss and was furious about what happened with possibly losing hundreds of thousands in revenue. I realized I had made the mistake though. Man, did it take balls for me to pull my boss aside and explain what had happened. Next story. Booked an epic family vacay featuring 4 stops in European cities. Was living in Europe at the time. Life happened and we decided not to take a trip on June, but instead in August. But I forgot to cancel the original hotel rooms. I had reserved the rooms on a credit card that I got paper bills. I got the mail one day and opened up the statement and saw over 4,000 euros in charges for the rooms. So by calling and begging the hotels, I ended up having to pay around 1,800 euros in total. But I totally messed that one up and spent a huge chunk of our vacation money on a trip that we never took. Next story. Wasn't my mistake, but it relates to the subject at hand. 2 of my friends used to intern at a hospital. One of them had a bottle of water he wanted to cool down, but the hospital's refrigerators were too warm. He decided to turn down the temperature in the fridge for a little while. A few hours later, his mentor stormed in and started yelling at him about how the fridge's temperature was carefully set to preserve the medication inside. And the temperature change destroyed thousands of dollars worth of prescribed medicine. So he, along with another guy, were both kicked out from the hospital. Next story. Didn't keep a copy of the move-in inventory. It's basically a form where you list the condition of different parts of the house for those unaware. For example, floor and living room scratched, walls and master bathroom are scuffed, etc. Well, my landlord very conveniently lost the copy I filled in that listed all of the pre-existing damage to the house, and my roommate and I had to pay $2,000 for repairs that should have been done before we stepped foot in that crap hole. Lesson learned. So kids that are going to college and are moving into their first house, please don't repeat my mistake. Take pictures of all of the damage with date stamps on them. Note all of the damage, keep a copy of that. And it's not a bad idea to have some proof that the landlord is aware of pre-existing damage. They can and will take advantage of you if you don't protect yourself. Next story. My ex was a problem alcoholic who would nightly run up $50 to $60 bar tabs at a place with $3.50 drinks. She had an ignition interlock on her car, so I had to drive wherever we went. She talked me into an expensive apartment where I still live. Then she hit me a couple of times, cheated, and broke up with me. In retrospect, that relationship was a series of mistakes. Next story. It's so late I doubt anyone will see this, but I have to get it off my chest. Hopefully this doesn't turn into a tifu by saying things I shouldn't, so I will be vague in some areas to protect myself. So, my wife and I were big fans of this small business, and as it turns out, it was becoming a franchise. We're relatively smart people with a balance of knowledge between us that should lead to being able to run a small franchise store. We are, let's say, in our 40s and know a few things about business and the industry the franchise is in. With experience under our belts and a passion for the product, we decided to invest. For those who don't know, there is a document called a Franchise Disclosure Document, FDD, that outlines pretty much everything about a franchise and exists to educate investors. We read through the FDD a dozen times at least and felt like we knew what we were getting ourselves into. After signing the franchise agreement, we noticed odd things happening, but don't put two and two together. Costs spiral out of control. Operations manuals are a joke. Procedures are so wrong that if we follow them to the letter, which is what you're supposed to do, we wouldn't ever open our doors. We finally did get the store open despite the help from the founders. Being such a new concept, the marketing plans were non-existent. Basically, their plan was to go around town and give your products away to get people to come to your store. Fast forward several years and hundreds of thousands of dollars later, the store lost money every day from the first day. We followed every tip we would get our hands on, but nothing worked. The cost of goods sold was way too high, and even with me working 70+ hours a week for free, labor was too high. Ultimately, we had to close the store and walk away. Our huge mistake cost us over $500,000. No more college funds for the kids. Other investments liquidated to keep the business afloat. If we held on much longer, we would have been homeless. Next story. Not really sure it was my mistake, but I took the blame to keep someone from losing a job. I was standing at a party, and a waitress bumped into me and dropped a bottle of Louis XIII cognac. It was around 100 years old and cost about $2,500. I would imagine they would have gotten exponentially more selling it by the shot or drink. I told the people in charge that it was my fault so that she wouldn't get fired.
Okay, and now they're married, right? That's how it works on Reddit. Something like this happens and now they're married. And if they do get married, it's either happily ever after or she cheated on him after a little while. But you know what? I'll leave you, fellow viewer, to decide what happened to these two people. Anyway, next story.
So, traded a paid-off 6-year-old Xterra with platinum warranty, 30,000 miles remaining, on a money pit 3-year-old F-150 and a $17K note on it. Dumped $8K into that stupid truck alone this year, and just had to get a serious issue. Truck would die randomly while running and nearly get stranded in the mountains, and I had to get that fixed at the dealership already in less than a year. So, just because you get a new job or raise doesn't mean you need to spend more money. Also, significantly overestimated the value of the truck. Found out looking up the VIN later on and checking what it actually sold for. Next story. Lending a friend of mine about 100 euros for motorcycle parts. I was 15 years old, so that was a lot of money for me. He crashed his bike under the influence of alcohol and drugs. The police confiscated his crashed bike with the new parts on it. When I asked the guy a few weeks later about the money, he acted like he didn't know a thing and even threatened to punch me if I ever asked again. Yeah, that was the end of that friendship. By the way, this guy looked like Scumbag Steve, the meme, so I should have known before. Next story. Was earning okay money and was doing a 30-mile commute every day. Decided to upgrade the wheels, went for a car on finance. It wasn't brand new, but it was less than 6 months old with low mileage. Within 6 months, though, I changed jobs to one that I had to commute to by train, and the car just sat there costing me tons of money and getting driven once every few weeks. 4 years of payments later, I've racked up a whopping 8,000 miles. Next story. So, when I was in high school, my girlfriend at the time thought it would be a good idea to sneak out and go stargazing. Fine, right? Well, my dumbass decided that the best place for this was in the practice field of my high school. It had rained for the past few days and the field was a freaking swamp, but that didn't stop me. I drove to the back and got my truck stuck in the mud. I ended up getting taken home by the police. The tow truck wouldn't drive his truck on the field because he said the school would make him pay for the damages. So me and my parents had to go to the store and buy about a 50-yard chain so the dude could pull my truck out. That chain ended up costing about $800. Next story. My wife and I came into some money and we needed a good tax write-off, or we were going to get hit with a big tax bill. So we decided to put as much solar panels and a good system on our house to the tune of $50,000. About a year later, we decided that due to our dwindling mental health and commute times, we were going to move to another house closer to work. To do that, however, meant we had to completely pay off the solar panels, which we still owed around $35,000, which meant the difference between a house we really wanted and one that we just liked. Next story. Oh boy. 2 years ago, I was working at a machine shop that primarily made industrial gauges and expensive metrology devices. I usually didn't work the expensive equipment, for good reason, and mostly assisted with minor stuff around the shop. One day, my boss asked me to open up one of the machines so some of the engineers could do work on it later. He didn't really tell me much besides to be very careful since it had a very expensive gold-plated mirror. So I cautiously try to open it up by unscrewing the bolts on the top, and as I successfully unscrew 2 of the 3 bolts, I hear an eerie crack noise. As I finish unscrewing the 3rd bolt, I heard the most massive earth-shattering glass crack, and the entire floor was covered in gold and purple tinted glass. My entire stomach dropped. Not only did I manage to break the mirror inside of the machine, but all of the lasers and UV viewing glass. I told my boss, and it turned out the machine had somewhere around $50,000 in parts. Needless to say, I got fired soon afterwards.
Well, folks, this has been a very painful video because money is involved, so I'm sympathetic to everybody. But I think we all make dumb financial decisions in our lifetimes, some more than others. But anyway, feel free to share yours, everybody. But thank you all so much for watching, commenting, have a really good day, and bye-bye!